The mahogany-paneled office smelled of old money and broken dreams. Ethan Calder stared at the red F on his test paper, while students outside whispered that the billionaire's son was just another rich failure. His father's ultimatum was brutal. One more failing grade, and he'd be shipped to a military academy in Montana. But someone had been watching from the mansion's shadows, someone who saw patterns where others saw chaos, someone whose brilliant mother had once been destroyed by the Calder family in ways no one could imagine. Maya Brooks was about to change Ethan's life forever, but not before exposing secrets that would bring an empire crashing down. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The mahogany-paneled office smelled of old money and disappointment. Ethan Calder sat frozen in the leather chair, his fingers gripping the armrests as the dean slid the test paper across the polished desk. The red F seemed to glow under the afternoon light streaming through the tall windows. "Ethan, this is the third exam this semester," Dean Morrison said, his voice carrying that particular tone of exhaustion reserved for students whose last names appeared on building plaques. "Your father has been very generous to this institution, but even I cannot justify continued enrollment if this pattern persists." Outside the office, Ethan could hear the whispers. Designer shoes shuffled against marble floors as students lingered near the doorway, their voices deliberately loud enough to be heard. "Did you hear? Another F. I mean, what do you expect? Money can't buy brain cells. My dad says his dad probably bought his way through school too." Ethan felt his throat tighten. He wanted to tell them they were wrong, that he studied every night until his eyes burned, that he read the same paragraphs over and over until the words became meaningless shapes. But the evidence sat right there on the desk, mocking him with its red ink. "I tried," he whispered, hating how pathetic he sounded. Dean Morrison sighed and leaned back in his chair. "Trying isn't enough at this level, son. Perhaps your father's suggestion about alternative education might be worth considering." The drive home felt endless. Ethan sat in the back of the town car, watching the city blur past, dreading the moment he'd have to walk through the front door. The Calder mansion rose into view like a monument to expectations he could never meet. 40 rooms, 12 bathrooms, a staff of 8, and not a single place where Ethan felt he belonged. He barely made it to his study room before his father appeared. Charles Calder didn't storm in the way other fathers might. He didn't yell or slam doors. That wasn't his style. Instead, he entered with the quiet, controlled fury of a man who'd built an empire through precision and intimidation. He placed the test paper, which he'd somehow already obtained, on Ethan's desk with deliberate care. "This is embarrassing, Ethan." For words. That was all it took. Ethan felt something crack inside his chest. "I studied, Dad. I really did. You just what? You just couldn't be bothered to focus? You just decided that being a Calder means nothing." Charles's voice remained level, which somehow made it worse. "Do you know what people will say? Do you understand that every failure of yours reflects on me, on this family, on everything I've built?" From the doorway, Ethan's 11-year-old sister Ivy watched with wide, frightened eyes. She'd learned long ago to stay silent during these moments, to become invisible when their father's disappointment filled the room. Charles straightened his tie, a gesture Ethan recognized as him regaining composure. "We'll discuss this further at dinner. Your mother and I have decided on consequences." After he left, the room felt suffocating. Ethan slumped in his chair, staring at the test paper. The questions that had seemed impossible during the exam now looked simple, obvious even. Why couldn't he do this? What was wrong with his brain? Down the hall, Anita Brooks continued her work, dusting the picture frames that lined the corridor. She'd been the Calder's maid for nearly 17 years, long enough to recognize the sound of a breaking heart. She'd heard the raised voice, the defeated silence that followed. Her hands moved mechanically across the frames while her mind drifted to her own daughter, Maya, who'd be arriving soon from school. Anita paused at a family portrait from 5 years ago. The Calders smiled their practice smiles, perfect and distant. She thought about her own life, about choices made and paths closed, and wondered if history had a way of repeating itself in houses like this. Maya arrived an hour later, her backpack slung over one shoulder, her school uniform slightly rumpled from the bus ride across town. At 16, she'd inherited her mother's warm brown eyes and quiet dignity, but she carried something else too, a sharpness, an awareness that noticed everything. "Hey, Mom," she called out, dropping her bag in the staff room off the kitchen. "Quiet, baby. The family's having a difficult day." Maya understood. She'd learned the rhythms of the Calder household, when to be invisible and when her presence might be tolerated. She headed to the kitchen to start her homework at the small table where the staff took their breaks. Through the doorway, she could see into the main corridor. Ethan emerged from his study, his face blotchy, his steps heavy. He moved like someone tried to hold himself together with sheer willpower. When he heard footsteps approaching, he flinched, turning quickly before realizing it was just Anita passing by with fresh linens. Maya watched him disappear up the main staircase, and something in her chest tightened with unexpected empathy. Evening descended on the mansion with all the warmth of a funeral. The dining room, with its crystal chandelier and table that could seat 20, felt cavernous with just 4 people. Charles sat at the head, Helen at the foot, with Ethan and Ivy positioned between them like chess pieces. The first course arrived in silence. Anita's hands trembled slightly as she served the soup, a detail only Maya, helping in the kitchen, noticed. Charles set down his spoon with precise gentleness. "Ethan, your mother and I have made a decision." Helen Calder, elegant in her pearls and perfectly styled blonde hair, kept her eyes on her bowl. Once a promising lawyer, she'd traded courtrooms for charity galas years ago, and somewhere along the way, she'd learned that silence was easier than confrontation. "If you fail one more exam, just one, I will pull you from that school and send you to Ashford Correctional Academy." Charles let the words settle like a judge delivering a sentence. It's a military-style institution in Montana. Perhaps structure and discipline will accomplish what privilege has failed to provide. Ethan's hand froze halfway to his water glass. "Dad, please. I'm trying. Trying is what people say when they're failing." Charles cut through his son's plea without raising his voice. "Results matter, Ethan. In business, in life, in everything. This family doesn't accept mediocrity." "Charles, don't you think that's extreme?" Helen's voice was soft, tentative. "He's just 17. Perhaps we could hire a tutor, give him more support. I've hired 4 tutors. Each one reported that Ethan lacks focus and discipline. This isn't about support. This is about character." Charles returned to his soup, the conversation apparently over in his mind. Ivy stared at her plate, her small hands clenched in her lap. Ethan felt the walls closing in, the air becoming too thick to breathe. He excused himself quietly, knowing that protest would only make things worse. He found himself in the mansion's library, a 2-story room filled with books that were more decoration than resource. His father had purchased entire collections at estate sales, leather-bound volumes that looked impressive but went largely unread. Ethan sank into one of the reading chairs, feeling utterly alone. You know, sitting in the dark isn't going to help. He jerked upright. Maya stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the hall light. She held a stack of clean towels, her reason for being in this part of the house. "I'm fine," Ethan said automatically. "You don't look fine." She stepped inside, setting the towels on a side table. "You look like someone just told you the world was ending." "Maybe it is." The words escaped before he could stop them. "Maybe I really am as stupid as everyone thinks." Maya studied him for a moment, her head tilted slightly. "Can I tell you something? You don't learn the wrong way. You just learn a different way." Ethan looked up at her, confused. "What does that mean?" "It means everyone's brain works differently. Some people see words and remember them. Some people need to hear things. Some people need patterns and pictures. There's no wrong way, just different ways." She shrugged, as if this were obvious. "Maybe you just haven't found your way yet." Something in her voice made Ethan pause. Not pity. He'd heard enough pity to recognize it. This was something else. Understanding, maybe, or simple human kindness, which felt revolutionary in this house. "Why do you care?" he asked, not cruelly, but genuinely curious. Maya considered the question. "Because I know what it feels like when people decide who you are before you get a chance to figure it out yourself." She left him there, collecting the towels and disappearing back into the parts of the mansion where staff belonged. But her words lingered, settling into the cracks in Ethan's armor. Later that night, Maya returned to the library to retrieve a book her mother had left behind. The room was empty now, but Ethan's calculus textbook lay open on the table, covered in frustrated scribbles and eraser marks. She glanced at the problems, her eyes moving quickly across the equations. Without really thinking about it, she pulled out a scrap piece of paper from her pocket and worked through 3 of the complex problems in quick, efficient strokes. The numbers made sense to her in a way they seemed to elude others. She'd always been like this. Patterns jumped out at her. Connections formed naturally in her mind. "What are you doing?" Maya spun around. Anita stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Nothing, Mom. Just looking." Anita walked over and glanced at the solved problems, then at her daughter. "Maya, listen to me carefully. Stay away from the Calder boy. Stay away from the problems. I know what you were doing. And I'm telling you, being too good in this house draws the wrong kind of attention." Anita's voice carried a weight Maya didn't understand. "People like us, we do our work and we stay invisible. That's how we survive." Maya wanted to argue, to ask why helping someone made them targets, but the look in her mother's eyes stopped her. There was something there, old pain, old fear, that Maya had never seen before. Upstairs in his private office, Charles Calder sat in the dark, his laptop screen casting blue light across his face. He scrolled through old files, old documents he kept password protected and hidden. Report cards from his own youth, each one worse than the last. Failed classes, angry letters from headmasters, the humiliation his own father had heaped upon him. He'd clawed his way out of that shame through sheer force of will, through ruthlessness and calculated risks. He'd built an empire specifically to prove he was more than those failing grades, more than the stupid son everyone had dismissed. And now his own son was following the same path. Charles closed the laptop with trembling hands. He wouldn't let it happen. He couldn't. Even if it meant being the villain in Ethan's story, he would save his son from the hell of being average. In his bedroom, Ethan lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling of his massive room, 30 feet across, with a sitting area and its own bathroom, and yet it felt like a cage. His father's words echoed in his mind, mixing with the whispers of classmates, with years of disappointing test scores. Maybe he really was broken. Maybe some people were just born to fail. But then Maya's voice cut through the darkness. "You don't learn the wrong way. You just learn a different way." He wanted to believe her. God, he wanted to believe that there was a version of himself that wasn't defined by red ink and disappointed sighs. 2 floors below, in the small room off the kitchen that served as staff quarters, Maya lay in her narrow bed, unable to sleep. She kept thinking about Ethan's face in the library, the desperation and defeat in his eyes. She'd seen that look before, in the mirror, during the times when the world felt like it was built for everyone except people like her. Her mother's warning echoed in her mind, but Maya had never been good at staying quiet when she saw someone drowning. Tomorrow, she decided. Tomorrow she'd try again. Morning light filtered through the mansion's tall windows as Maya accompanied her mother to work the next day. Saturday meant deep cleaning, and Anita had learned long ago that having Maya help meant finishing hours earlier. The library was on their list, that sprawling room with its endless shelves and delicate furniture that required careful attention. Maya was halfway up the rolling ladder, dusting the higher shelves, when she heard something crash below. Ethan had entered through the side door, arms full of folders and textbooks, trying to sneak in without being noticed. He didn't see the stack of encyclopedias someone had left on the floor for reshelving. His foot caught the edge, and suddenly papers exploded into the air like startled birds. "No, no, no," Ethan muttered, dropping to his knees to gather the scattered mess. Practice tests, study guides, notes covered in his cramped handwriting. All of it mixed together in chaos that matched the state of his mind. Maya descended the ladder quickly. "Here, let me help. I don't need pity." The words came out sharper than he intended, his embarrassment turning to defensive anger. Maya knelt anyway, gathering papers without looking at him. "It's not pity. It's teamwork." She handed him a stack of calculus worksheets. People work together. That's how things get done. Ethan paused, his automatic rejection faltering. There was something matter-of-fact in her tone that disarmed him. He accepted the papers silently, noticing how she'd organized them by subject without even being asked. "You're good at that," he said quietly. "At what?" "Seeing patterns. Organization." He gestured at the neatly stacked papers she'd arranged in seconds. I spent an hour last night trying to organize these and gave up. Maya sat back on her heels, studying him. Can I show you something? Before he could answer, she pulled out a blank piece of paper from his stack and drew a simple circle. Then she added 4 lines extending from it, creating a shape like a sun. At the end of each line, she drew a different geometric shape: square, triangle, star, pentagon. What are you doing? Ethan asked. Your brain remembers stories and pictures better than random information. Watch. She pointed to each shape. Square is foundation. That's your basic concepts. Triangle is connection, how ideas link together. Star is importance, key formulas or dates. Pentagon is application, how you use it in problems. She handed him the paper. Now, when you study, instead of just reading, you turn the information into this map. Give me any topic. The French Revolution. Maya drew quickly. In the center, FR 1789. For lines out. Square, economic crisis, debt from wars. Triangle, estate system, 99% had no power. Star, storming Bastille, July 14th. Pentagon, led to Napoleon, new government. In 30 seconds, you just summarized what took me 3 hours to not remember. Ethan said, staring at the simple diagram. Because your brain was trying to memorize words. I'm giving it a story with pictures. Your mind holds on to stories. Maya tapped the paper. Try it. Take any chapter and map it like this. Ethan looked at her like she'd just revealed a magic trick. Why do you know how to do this? She shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. I've always seen things in patterns. Numbers, words, dates, they all connect in my head like shapes and colors. I thought everyone did it until teachers kept telling me I was doing things the complicated way. She smiled slightly. Turns out my complicated way actually makes things simple. Show me more, Ethan said, and for the first time in months, there was hope in his voice. Okay, but let's make it real. I'm going to give you a test. Maya grabbed another sheet. I'm going to read you 20 random words. You're going to remember them in order using the pattern method. I can barely remember 5 things. Not anymore. Listen, for each word, you're going to attach it to a body movement and a color. Red words you reach up for. Blue words you touch your chest. Green words you tap your leg. Yellow words you touch the ground. Got it. Ethan nodded, skeptical but willing. Maya read, apple, democracy, river, telephone, justice, mountain, chemistry, freedom, elephant, calculator, midnight, thunder, skeleton, paradise, revolution, bicycle, symphony, gravity, courage, photograph. She made him stand up. Now, do the movements while I say them again, and picture each word in its color. They went through the list 3 times, Ethan feeling ridiculous waving his arms and tapping his legs. But then Maya said, okay, tell them back to me. Ethan closed his eyes, recreated the movements in his mind, and to his absolute shock, the words came flooding back. All 20. In perfect order. I did it, he whispered. Then louder, I actually did it. You did. Maya's smile was genuine. Your brain isn't broken, Ethan. You just needed a different language. From the doorway, Anita watched the entire exchange. Her heart sank. She'd seen this before. Her daughter's gift for teaching, for reaching people others had written off. And she knew exactly where it led in a house like this. Later that evening, after the Calders had finished dinner and retreated to their separate wings, Anita found Maya in their small room. We need to talk. Maya looked up from her homework. Is something wrong? I saw you with Ethan today. Anita sat on the edge of Maya's bed, her hands folded tightly. Baby, I need you to understand something. Getting involved with this family is dangerous. Their problems become your burdens, and you'll never get thanked for carrying them. I was just helping him study, Mom. I know, and that's how it starts. Anita's voice cracked slightly. You're brilliant, Maya. You're going to do amazing things. But not here. Not with them. People like the Calders, they take and take until there's nothing left. And when you have nothing left to give, they throw you away. What happened to you here, Mom? Maya had never asked directly before, but the pain in her mother's voice demanded the question. Anita stood abruptly. Nothing you need to worry about. Just promise me you'll be careful. Promise me you won't let them pull you into their world. Maya wanted to push, to demand the full truth, but her mother's expression stopped her. I promise. But even as she said it, Maya knew the promise was already broken. Monday morning at Ashford Preparatory School, Ethan walked into his literature class with his stomach in knots. Mrs. Patterson had a reputation for cold-calling students, for exposing those who hadn't done the reading. Today's topic, symbolism in The Great Gatsby. Mr. Calder, Mrs. Patterson said, barely 5 minutes into class. Tell us about the significance of the green light. The old Ethan would have frozen, mumbled something vague, and endured the pitying looks from classmates. But this morning, he'd spent an hour with Maya's pattern method, mapping out the chapter in colors and shapes. He stood, his voice steadier than expected. The green light represents unattainable dreams. It's positioned across the bay from Gatsby's mansion, literally out of reach. Green suggests both money and envy, which ties to Gatsby's pursuit of Daisy. The light appears in key moments when Gatsby's longing is strongest, and Fitzgerald places it at the end of the dock, symbolizing how desire exists at the edge of reality. Silence filled the classroom. Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows rose. That's actually quite good, Mr. Calder. Behind him, someone whispered, did he just become smart overnight? Another voice, probably cheating somehow. But Ethan barely heard them. For the first time in his academic life, he'd answered correctly, completely, confidently. The feeling was intoxicating. At lunch, he texted Maya, it worked. Your method actually worked. Her response came quickly. Told you. Your brain just needed the right key. That afternoon, after her own classes ended, Maya met her mother at the mansion. She'd barely set down her backpack when Ethan appeared in the kitchen doorway, practically vibrating with energy. Can we do another session? Please? I have a history quiz tomorrow, and I want to try mapping it. Maya glanced at her mother, who'd gone rigid at the sink. I don't know if. Please, Maya. You don't understand what today felt like. I actually knew things. I could participate. His desperation was palpable. Just one more session. Anita turned off the water, dried her hands slowly. After a long moment, she nodded once, curtly, and left the kitchen. Maya led Ethan to the library, where they spread out his history textbook on the large oak table. The afternoon light slanted through the windows, creating pools of gold across the pages. Okay, show me what you need to learn, Maya said. The entire American Revolution. Timeline, causes, key battles, outcomes. Ethan groaned. It's overwhelming. My brain just sees a wall of dates and names. Then we break down the wall. Start with the big picture. Maya drew a large circle in the center of a blank page. Revolution, 1775 to 1783. Now, for main sections, causes, key events, important people, results. She worked quickly, her pen creating a web of information that transformed dense paragraphs into visual stories. Ethan watched, mesmerized by how she could take chaos and create clarity. Now you try, she said, sliding the textbook toward him. Take the next chapter and map it yourself. He struggled at first, his diagrams clumsy compared to hers. But Maya was patient, guiding him through the process, showing him how to identify what mattered versus what was just filler detail. The test won't ask you everything, she explained. It'll ask for connections and causes. So focus on the why, not just the what. As they worked, something shifted between them. The awkwardness of their different positions in the household. Her mother cleaning his home, him born into wealth she'd never know, faded into the background. Here, in this moment, they were just two teenagers trying to solve a problem. During a break, Ethan leaned back in his chair and said quietly, Can I tell you something? Sure. I'm terrified of disappointing my father. Like, genuinely terrified. Every time I see him, I feel like I'm shrinking. Like I'm becoming less of a person with every disappointed look. His voice wavered. Sometimes I think it would be easier if he just didn't care at all. Maya set down her pen, giving him her full attention. My mom raised me alone. My dad left before I was born. For a long time, I was angry about it, feeling abandoned. She paused, choosing her words carefully. But my mom told me something that stuck. The people who hurt us are usually hurt themselves. They pass down their pain without meaning to. Your mom is really wise. She is. She's also really careful about who we trust. Maya's expression grew serious. She had someone betray her once. Someone she helped, who turned around and used her work as their own. It destroyed her future. She never finished college because of it. That's why she's so protective of me now. Ethan felt something cold settle in his stomach. Someone stole her work? Yeah, someone powerful who could get away with it. Maya looked away. She won't talk about it much, but I know it changed her whole life. Made her afraid of standing out. They sat in silence for a moment, both processing different pieces of a puzzle neither fully understood yet. For what it's worth, Ethan finally said, "I'm glad you didn't stay invisible. You're saving my life right now." Maya smiled softly. "You're saving it yourself. I'm just showing you where the tools are." From a second-floor landing, Charles Calder observed the library below through the decorative railing. He'd come home early from the office, intending to review some contracts in his study, when he noticed lights on in the library at an unusual hour. He watched Ethan lean over a textbook, actually engaged, actually studying. A girl sat across from him. He couldn't see her face clearly from this angle, but her posture suggested focus and competence. Finally, taking responsibility, Charles muttered to himself. He assumed Ethan had hired some tutor from school, some classmate willing to help for the right price. The thought pleased him. Initiative, resourcefulness, these were qualities worth developing. He had no idea the girl teaching his son was the daughter of his maid. He had no idea that 17 years ago, he destroyed her mother's future to build his own. The past, Charles believed, was dead and buried. He had no idea it was about to claw its way back to the surface. Back in the library, Ethan finished mapping out an entire chapter on his own. Maya checked his work, nodding approval. "This is good. Really good. You're getting it. Because you're a good teacher." Ethan met her eyes. "Thank you, Maya. Seriously, you didn't have to do this." "Maybe I did," she said quietly. "Maybe we both needed this." Little Ivy appeared in the doorway, her eyes wide with curiosity. She'd been drawn by voices, by the rare sound of her brother laughing. She crept closer, watching as Maya explained something about visual memory using a simple story about a rabbit and 3 foxes. "That's so cool," Ivy breathed, making them both jump. "Ivy, what are you doing here?" Ethan asked. "I heard you guys. I wanted to see." She stepped fully into the room, staring at Maya with open admiration. "You're better than all my teachers. They just make us memorize stuff without explaining why." Maya smiled at the younger girl. "Want to try? Give me something you're learning in school." Ivy practically bounced with excitement. "Multiplication tables. I can't remember anything past 6 times 7. For the next 20 minutes, Maya taught Ivy a rhythm-based method for memorization, turning numbers into a song. By the end, Ivy could recite up to 12 times 12 without hesitation. "You're like a superhero," Ivy declared, completely serious. After Ivy left, promising not to tell their parents about the session, Ethan gathered his materials with a lightness he hadn't felt in years. Same time, what Maya didn't know was that every choice has consequences, and in the Calder mansion, debts from the past were coming due. The foundation she was helping Ethan build would soon be tested in ways neither of them could predict. But tonight, in this moment, a billionaire's son had hope. And the maid's daughter had given him the most valuable gift of all, the belief that he could save himself. The tutoring sessions became routine over the next 2 weeks. Every afternoon after school, Maya would arrive with her mother, and within an hour, she and Ethan would find themselves in the library, surrounded by textbooks and Maya's pattern diagrams. Ethan's confidence grew with each session, his grades climbing from failures to solid passes, then to marks that actually impressed his teachers. On a Wednesday afternoon, they were working through European history when Maya needed an example for explaining trade routes. She stood and scanned the library shelves, looking for an atlas or reference book that might help visualize the concept. Her fingers traced along the spines of old volumes until she found something unexpected wedged between 2 encyclopedias. It was a leather-bound ledger, the kind used for household accounts, thick with age and dust. "This might work," she muttered, pulling it free. Old records could show. She opened it and froze. The pages were filled with meticulous entries dating back decades. Staff names, positions, salaries, and in some cases additional notes. Maya flipped through, mildly interested, until she reached a section from 17 years ago. There, in faded blue ink, Anita Brooks, household staff, special clearance. The words special clearance were underlined twice. Below it, in different handwriting, someone had added, restricted access to private office. Nadea enforced it. What's that? Ethan asked, noticing Maya had gone completely still. She snapped the ledger shut, her heart hammering. Nothing, just old staff records. But her voice betrayed her confusion. Why would a maid need special clearance? What had her mother been doing in this house that required non-disclosure agreements? That evening, in their small room off the kitchen, Maya waited until her mother finished her shower before confronting her. Mom, what does special clearance mean? Anita, toweling her hair, paused mid-motion. What are you talking about? I found an old ledger today, from 17 years ago. Your name was in it, listed with special clearance and a non-disclosure agreement. Maya held up the ledger she borrowed. What were you doing here that needed that kind of documentation? Anita's face transformed. The warmth drained away, replaced by something hard and frightened. She crossed the small room in 3 steps and snatched the ledger from Maya's hands. Where did you find this? In the library. Mom, what? Drop it, Maya. Anita's voice was sharp, final. Whatever you think you found, it's none of your business. It's ancient history that should stay buried. But, I said drop it. Anita rarely raised her voice. The force of it made Maya recoil. Some doors stay closed for a reason. You start opening them, you'll find things you can't handle. Things that will hurt you. She shoved the ledger into her bag and left the room, leaving Maya sitting on the bed, more confused and curious than ever. What secrets was her mother hiding? While Maya grappled with mysteries in her mother's past, Ethan was experiencing something he'd never known before: academic success. His history teacher returned his latest essay with a bright 8 circled at the top. During math class, he saw the complex equation on the board that had stumped 3 other students. The whispers changed. Instead of mockery, there was suspicion. He's definitely cheating somehow. Maybe his dad paid someone to take his tests. There's no way someone goes from F's to A's that fast naturally. But Ethan didn't care about the whispers anymore. For the first time in his life, he understood what he was learning. Maya's techniques had unlocked something in his brain, a way of processing information that actually worked for him. He texted Maya during lunch. Got an A on my history essay. Your compression method is incredible. Her response came quickly. That was all you. I just showed you the tools. That afternoon, they met in the library for another session. Maya taught him what she called the compression technique, a more advanced version of her pattern method that allowed him to take entire chapters and compress them into single visual anchors. Think of it like a photograph, she explained, drawing a simple image of a tree. This tree represents the entire Revolutionary War. The roots are the causes: taxation, representation, colonial frustration. The trunk is the war itself: battles, key figures, major events. The branches are the outcomes: independence, constitution, new government. One image holds everything. Ethan stared at the simple drawing. And my brain can actually do this? Your brain already does this with things you care about. Think about your favorite movie. You don't memorize every line and scene, but you can tell me the whole plot, right? Because your brain compressed it into a story with key moments. She tapped his textbook. We're just training your brain to do that with academic content. They spent 2 hours building compression anchors for his upcoming exams. By the end, Ethan could recall entire units using nothing but simple visual triggers. During a water break, they found themselves talking about things beyond studying. My mom asked me about you yesterday, Maya said, leaning against one of the library's shelves. She wanted to know why I'm spending so much time here. What did you tell her? That I'm helping a friend. Maya smiled slightly. She wasn't thrilled. She thinks the Calder family is dangerous. Ethan's expression darkened. Maybe she's right. My father certainly is. What do you mean? He hesitated, then said quietly, my dad didn't become successful by being nice. He crushed competitors, destroyed people's careers, bought and manipulated his way to the top. I've heard things over the years, bits of conversations he thought I wasn't paying attention to. He's not a good man, Maya. He's just a powerful one. Maya thought about the ledger, about her mother's terrified reaction. Do you think he's ever done something really terrible? Like something illegal? Probably. But men like my father don't face consequences. They buy lawyers, silence people, make problems disappear. Ethan looked directly at her. That's why I need to be different. I need to prove I can succeed without becoming him. Their friendship deepened with each session. Ethan helped Maya carry supplies when Anita's back was hurting. Maya taught him techniques that went beyond academics, how to manage anxiety, how to center himself when panic threatened to overwhelm him. They ate lunch together during study breaks, sharing stories about their completely different lives. Maya told him about riding the bus across town, about her public school with its overcrowded classrooms and outdated textbooks. Ethan told her about the crushing loneliness of a house with 40 rooms, but no warmth. "Sometimes I think you're richer than me," Ethan said one afternoon. "You have your mom. You have each other. All I have is expectations and disappointment." "You have more than that now," Maya said softly. "You have yourself. The real version, not the one your father wants you to be." One evening, as they were packing up their materials, Helen Calder appeared in the library doorway. She moved quietly, elegantly, her presence almost ghost-like in the dimming light. "So you're the reason," Helen said softly, looking at Maya. Both teenagers jumped. Ethan stood quickly. "Mom, we were just studying." "Yes, I can see that." Helen stepped into the room, her eyes studying Maya with an intensity that made the girl uncomfortable. "You're Anita's daughter, aren't you?" "Yes, ma'am," Maya said, her voice carefully neutral. "What's your name?" "Maya Brooks." Helen nodded slowly, as if confirming something. "Ethan has been different lately. More confident, more present. His teachers have been calling with updates, good updates for the first time in years." She looked at her son. "I suspected he'd found help, but I didn't realize it was coming from within our own home." There was no judgment in her voice, only a quiet wonder. "Maya's been tutoring me," Ethan explained. "She has this method of teaching that actually makes sense to me. I can see that." Helen's eyes remained on Maya. "You're clearly gifted. Are you planning to attend college?" Maya shifted uncomfortably. "If I can afford it, yes, ma'am." "You should. A mind like yours shouldn't be wasted." Helen turned to leave, then paused. "Thank you, Maya, for giving me my son back." After she left, Maya and Ethan exchanged glances. "Your mom is nicer than I expected," Maya whispered. "She used to be a lawyer, a good one. Then she married my dad and became quieter, like she's always apologizing for taking up space." Ethan gathered his books. "I think she sees something in you that reminds her of who she used to be." What neither of them knew was that Helen wasn't the only one watching. In his office on the second floor, Charles Calder reviewed security footage from the mansion's extensive camera system. He did this occasionally, keeping tabs on his household, ensuring no one was stealing or slacking in their duties. Tonight, he queued up footage from the library over the past 2 weeks. And there, on his screen, he saw her, the maid's daughter, sitting at his expensive furniture, teaching his son, acting as if she belonged in spaces meant for better people. His jaw tightened as he watched Ethan laugh at something Maya said. As he saw them work together, saw the easy familiarity between them. "What the hell is this?" he muttered. He paused the footage on a clear frame of Maya's face. Young, pretty, smart enough to have gained his son's trust. Charles had built his empire by reading people, by seeing angles and manipulations others missed. And this looked exactly like a manipulation. A poor girl attaching herself to his wealthy son. A maid's daughter worming her way into his family's trust, probably hoping for money, for connections, for a way out of her station. Charles had seen it before. Gold diggers came in all forms. He picked up his phone and dialed his head of security. "I need a complete background check on Anita Brooks and her daughter Maya. Employment history, financial records, everything. I want to know who these people really are." That night, while Ethan slept soundly for the first time in months, dreaming of academic success and genuine friendship, Maya lay awake in her small room, thinking about the ledger and her mother's terrified reaction. In the kitchen, Anita stood at the sink in the darkness, her hands gripping the edge of the counter so tightly her knuckles went white. She'd known this day would come. She'd known that helping the Calder boy would bring attention, would stir up the past she'd tried so desperately to bury. She moved to the cabinet where she kept her personal belongings and pulled out a small metal box. Inside were documents she'd kept hidden for 17 years. Letters, drafts, proof of work that carried someone else's name. Among them was a letter she'd almost burned a dozen times. It was addressed to her from Charles Calder, written when they were both in their early 20s, before he'd become the monster he was now. The letter was brief, typed on expensive stationery. "Your services are no longer required. The thesis has been submitted under my name. The NDA you signed will be enforced. Any attempt to claim credit will result in legal action. Thank you for your discretion. Anita's hands trembled as she held the letter. She'd been top of her class, brilliant and ambitious, working her way through college on scholarships and part-time jobs. Charles had been failing, desperate, from a wealthy family that expected success. He'd hired her to tutor him. Then he'd asked her to help with his thesis. Then he'd taken everything she'd written, everything she'd researched, and submitted it as his own work. That thesis had earned him his degree, had opened doors that led to his first business ventures, had become the foundation of everything he'd built. And Anita had been erased, threatened into silence, destroyed before she'd even had a chance to begin. She pulled out a lighter, flames dancing in the darkness. It would be so easy to burn it all, to make sure Maya had never discovered the truth about what the Calders had stolen from them. But something stopped her. Maybe it was seeing Maya's gift for teaching. Maybe it was watching her daughter give Ethan the same help Anita had once given Charles. Except Maya's help was pure, untainted by exploitation. Or maybe Anita was just tired of running from the truth. She put the letter back in the box and hid it in a new location. Not destroyed, but preserved, just in case the past needed to speak one day. The announcement came during Monday morning assembly. The entire junior class would face a comprehensive midterm exam in 2 weeks, covering every subject weighted heavily toward their final grades. For students at Ashford Preparatory, this exam could mean the difference between elite college acceptances and crushing disappointment. For Ethan, it meant something even more terrifying. This was his father's deadline. One more failure, and he'd be sent to that military academy in Montana. This exam would determine everything. "You're ready," Maya told him that afternoon in the library. But her voice carried less certainty than usual. What if I'm not? What if I panic during the test and forget everything? Ethan's hands shook as he flipped through his study materials. "Maya, this isn't just any exam. This is my entire future. Then we work harder. We have 2 weeks. That's enough time to reinforce everything." She pulled out a fresh stack of paper. "We're going to create a master compression anchor for every single subject. By the time that exam comes, you'll have a visual library in your mind." They worked for 6 hours straight that day. History compressed into a single tree image with branches for each era. Mathematics became a building with each floor representing a different concept. Literature transformed into a gallery where each painting held a different novel's themes. Ethan's brain hurt from the intensity, but something remarkable was happening. The information was actually sticking, not through force or repetition, but through understanding and connection. During a late-night break, they sat on the library floor, surrounded by papers covered in their unique visual language. "Can I tell you something?" Ethan said quietly. "Always. You're my only real friend. Everyone at school either hates me or wants something from me. But you actually see me." His voice cracked slightly. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Maya felt her chest tighten. "Don't say that. You're stronger than you think. I'm strong because you believed in me first." He met her eyes. "Thank you, Maya, for everything." The moment hung between them, intimate and fragile. Then Maya's phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Time to leave. Now, the spell broke. They gathered their materials quickly, both suddenly aware of how close they'd been sitting, how much this friendship had started to mean. After Maya left, Ethan remained in the library, feeling strangely empty. He didn't notice his father watching from the doorway, having witnessed the entire exchange. Charles had seen enough. The way his son looked at that girl, it wasn't just gratitude. There was something deeper forming, something dangerous. The next morning, Charles intercepted Anita as she arrived for work. "Mrs. Brooks, a moment, please." Anita's blood went cold. She followed him into his private office, a room she hadn't entered in 17 years. "I'll be direct," Charles said, remaining standing to maintain the power dynamic. "Your daughter's tutoring sessions with my son are finished. Effective immediately." "Sir, I don't understand." "You don't need to understand. You need to follow instructions." His voice was ice. "Ethan is forming an inappropriate attachment. Your daughter is overstepping boundaries. This arrangement ends today. Maya has done nothing wrong. She's helped Ethan more than any expensive tutor you hired, which is precisely the problem." Charles leaned against his desk, arms crossed. "A maid's daughter has no business being that essential to my son's life." It creates expectations, complications. I'm sure you understand. Anita understood perfectly. She'd spent 17 years understanding men like Charles Calder. We need this job, Mr. Calder. Please don't. I'm not firing you. I'm simply enforcing appropriate boundaries. You and Maya are to avoid Ethan entirely. No conversations, no tutoring sessions, no contact of any kind. He picked up an envelope from his desk. Here's a bonus for your years of service. Consider it compensation for your daughter's time. Anita didn't take the envelope. You can't do this to him. Ethan needs. I decide what my son needs. Charles's voice dropped dangerously low. And what he needs is to stand on his own, without developing dependencies on people who are beneath his station. Are we clear? Every fiber of Anita's being wanted to scream at him, to tell him exactly what she thought of his station and his stolen success. But she had Maya to think about, bills to pay, a life that couldn't afford the luxury of honesty. Crystal clear, sir. Good. Now get to work. Anita left his office feeling like she'd swallowed broken glass. She found Maya in the kitchen, preparing to help with her usual tasks before their afternoon session. Baby, we need to talk. Maya took one look at her mother's face and knew. He found out. You can't see Ethan anymore. He's forbidden it. But Mom, his exam is in less than 2 weeks. He's not ready yet. He still needs. It doesn't matter what he needs. We don't have a choice. Anita grabbed her daughter's hands. Please, Maya. Please don't fight this. I can't lose this job. We can't afford for you to make an enemy of Charles Calder. Maya felt tears burn behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Did you at least tell him that Ethan's grades have improved? That I've actually helped? He doesn't care about that. Men like him only care about control. Anita's voice softened. I'm sorry, baby. I really am. They left the mansion that afternoon without saying goodbye to Ethan. Maya's phone buzzed repeatedly with his texts, but she couldn't bring herself to respond. What could she possibly say? When Ethan came home from school and found the library empty, he checked his phone. No response from Maya. He went to find Anita, but the other staff members said she'd left early. Then his father appeared. Looking for someone? Where's Maya? The maid's daughter won't be teaching you anymore. I've put a stop to that inappropriate arrangement. Charles spoke as if discussing nothing more significant than changing the gardening schedule. What? No, Dad, you can't. I can and I have. That girl was creating an unhealthy dependency. You need to learn to succeed independently. She was helping me succeed. For the first time in my life, I was actually learning. Ethan's voice rose, desperation making him bold. Why would you take that away from me? Because I protect this family from manipulation. That girl saw an opportunity and took advantage of your vulnerability. It ends now. That's not true. Maya never asked for anything. She helped me because Ethan's voice cracked. Because she's a better person than you'll ever be. Charles's expression hardened. Go to your room. We'll discuss your attitude later. I'm not a child you can send away. Then stop acting like one. Charles turned toward his office. The tutoring sessions are over. You'll take your exam like everyone else, on your own merit or not at all. Ethan stood in the hallway, feeling his world collapse. The exam was 13 days away. Maya had given him tools, but he wasn't confident enough to use them alone yet. They'd planned more sessions, deeper reinforcement practice tests. Without her, he'd drown. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He tried to study, but anxiety made the words blur on the page. Every technique Maya had taught him seemed to vanish in the flood of panic. He was back to being that failing student, the disappointment, the stupid billionaire son who couldn't do anything right. At 2 a.m, he made a decision. He grabbed his phone and texted Maya, I need to see you. Please, just one more time before the exam. The response took an hour, but finally came, it's too risky. I don't care about risk. I care about not losing the only person who believed in me. Another long pause. Then, tomorrow night, the coffee shop on Maple Street, 7 p.m. Ethan stared at the message, relief flooding through him. He'd disobey his father, risk whatever punishment came, because some things mattered more than obedience. Maya mattered more. Meanwhile, Helen Calder confronted her husband in their bedroom. You fired Maya? I enforced appropriate boundaries, Charles said, loosening his tie. That girl was helping our son, really helping him. His grades improved, his confidence grew, he was finally happy. He was becoming dependent on someone from an inferior position. It was inappropriate. Helen's voice rose, something that rarely happened. Inferior. She's a brilliant young woman who had the patience and skill to reach Ethan when every expensive tutor failed. And you threw her away because of your ego? Watch your tone, Helen. No. Helen stood her ground, surprising even herself. I've watched you treat our son like a business project for years. I've stayed quiet while you crushed his spirit with your impossible expectations. But this is cruel even for you. Charles turned to face his wife fully. You know nothing about what I'm protecting him from. Then tell me, for once in our marriage, be honest with me. Helen's eyes filled with tears. Why are you so afraid of him succeeding with someone else's help? What are you really protecting him from? Charles's mask slipped for just a moment. Helen saw something raw and terrified flash across his face before he locked it away again. Go to bed, Helen. This conversation is over. But Helen had seen the truth in that moment of vulnerability. Her husband wasn't protecting Ethan from manipulation. He was protecting himself from his own past, from his own failures and frauds being exposed. She didn't know the details yet, but she was determined to find out. The next evening, Ethan snuck out of the mansion through the service entrance. He caught a bus across town, something he'd never done before, and found the coffee shop where Maya waited in a back corner booth. She looked tired, worried. When she saw him, relief and fear mixed on her face. Your father finds out about this. I don't care. Ethan slid into the booth across from her. Maya, I can't do this without you. The exam is less than 2 weeks away, and I'm falling apart. You're not falling apart. You're just scared. She pulled out a notebook from her bag. But we don't have much time, so we need to make this count. They worked for 3 hours in that coffee shop, Maya drilling him on everything they covered, reinforcing the visual anchors, building his confidence back up. Other customers came and went, and the barista had to remind them twice that they were closing soon. You have to believe in yourself, Maya said as they finally prepared to leave. All the techniques, all the patterns, they only work if you trust your mind. The exam isn't just about knowing the material. It's about knowing you can handle it. How do I do that? You stop fighting against yourself. You stop believing you're broken. You look at that test paper and remember, she tapped his chest gently. You've already done the hard part. You've already changed. The exam is just proof of what you already know. As they stood outside the coffee shop, reality pressing back in, Ethan said quietly, if I pass this exam, it's because of you. If you pass, it's because you finally believe in yourself. Maya smiled, though her eyes were sad. Good luck, Ethan. I really mean that. She walked away into the evening, and Ethan watched until she disappeared around a corner. He felt stronger than when he'd arrived, but also heartbroken in a way he couldn't quite name. Back at home, he found his father waiting in his study. Where were you? Ethan met his father's eyes without flinching. Getting ready to pass my exam. Without your help, without your control, without your permission. For the first time in his life, Ethan Calder didn't apologize for existing. And Charles saw something in his son's eyes that genuinely surprised him. Determination. Real, unbreakable determination. The kind Charles himself had possessed once, before power had made him comfortable. The exam is in 12 days, Charles said quietly. I hope you're ready. So do I. Ethan replied and walked to his room. In the darkness of his bedroom, he opened his notebook to the master compression anchors Maya had helped him create. He closed his eyes and saw them clearly. The tree of history, the building of mathematics, the gallery of literature. She'd given him more than study techniques. She'd given him a way to see himself differently. Now he just had to prove she hadn't wasted her faith in him. 12 days until everything changed. The morning of the midterm exam arrived gray and cold. Ethan woke at 5, his stomach churning with anxiety. He'd barely slept, his mind cycling through every visual anchor Maya had taught him, every pattern and compression technique they developed together. In the bathroom mirror, his reflection looked older somehow. The boy who'd sat in Dean Morrison's office months ago, defeated and broken, had been replaced by someone harder, more determined. But underneath that determination lived a terror that wouldn't go away. What if he failed anyway? What if Maya's techniques only worked with her there to guide him? What if he really was just stupid, and these past weeks had been nothing but a temporary illusion? He dressed in his school uniform, each button feeling like a countdown. Downstairs, the mansion was quiet except for the kitchen staff preparing breakfast. His father had already left for an early meeting. Helen sat alone in the dining room, sipping coffee and reading the newspaper. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said softly when Ethan entered. "Big day." Yeah, he couldn't manage more than that. Helen set down her cup and studied her son. "Ethan, whatever happens today, I want you to know something. You've already succeeded. The change in you these past weeks, the confidence, the dedication, the person you're becoming, that matters more than any grade. Try telling Dad that." "I have. Many times." She smiled sadly. "He doesn't listen to me. But maybe today, you'll show him what I already see, that you're stronger than he ever gave you credit for." Ethan wanted to believe her, but the weight of expectation pressed down on his chest, making it hard to breathe. The exam hall at Ashford Preparatory had been transformed. Desks arranged in perfect rows, each student separated by 4 feet of space to prevent cheating. Proctors positioned at strategic points, watching for any suspicious movement. The atmosphere felt like a prison. Ethan took his assigned seat near the middle of the room. Around him, classmates whispered last-minute review notes, flipped through study guides, looked confident or terrified in equal measure. He closed his eyes and tried to remember Maya's voice from their last session. "The mind wants stories, not pressure. Trust what you've built." The exam proctor, a stern woman named Mrs. Davenport, began distributing the test booklets face down. The rustle of paper sounded impossibly loud in the tense silence. "You have 4 hours," Mrs. Davenport announced. "No talking, no phones, no leaving except for emergency bathroom breaks with escort. When I say begin, you may turn over your exam. Good luck." Ethan's hands shook as he placed them flat on the desk, waiting. His heart hammered so hard he was certain everyone could hear it. "Begin." He flipped the booklet open and immediately felt his vision narrow. The first question stared up at him about the American Civil War, asking for causes, key battles, and long-term consequences. 3 months ago, this would have sent him into a spiral of panic. But Maya's tree appeared in his mind. Roots representing causes, trunk for the war itself, branches showing outcomes. He closed his eyes for just a moment, seeing the image clearly, then opened them and began to write. The words flowed. Not perfectly, not without effort, but they came. He moved through the history section, then into mathematics. When the first algebra problem appeared, he saw Maya's building in his mind. Each floor a different concept, each room a specific formula. He worked through the problem systematically, checking his work twice before moving on. Halfway through the exam, something remarkable happened. Ethan entered what Maya had called the flow state, that mental space where thinking becomes automatic, where knowledge and intuition merge into seamless understanding. His anxiety didn't disappear, but it transformed into focused energy. He wasn't fighting the test anymore. He was having conversation with it. Questions about literature brought up his mental gallery, each painting holding themes and symbols from the novels they'd studied. Science questions triggered the periodic table he'd memorized using Maya's color coding system. Even the essay section, usually his worst nightmare, felt manageable when he approached it as telling a story rather than proving his intelligence. Teachers walking between the rows noticed something unusual. Ethan Calder wasn't frozen in panic. He wasn't staring at the ceiling or chewing his pen in frustration. He was working, truly working, with a focus they'd never seen from him before. Mr. Harrison, his math teacher, paused near Ethan's desk and glanced at the work visible on his page. The equations were solved correctly, efficiently. He raised an eyebrow and moved on, making a mental note to watch this student more carefully. The improvement was either miraculous or suspicious, and Mr. Harrison had learned to be skeptical of miracles. 3.5 hours in, Ethan reached the final page. His hand cramped from writing. His back ached from hunching over the desk, but his mind felt clearer than it had in years. He reviewed his answers methodically, catching a few small errors and correcting them. With 15 minutes remaining, he set down his pen and allowed himself to breathe. He'd done it. Not perfectly, probably not brilliantly, but competently, thoroughly. He'd finished the entire exam with time to spare, and more importantly, he'd understood what he was doing. For the first time in his academic life, Ethan hadn't just memorized answers. He'd comprehended the questions. When Mrs. Davenport called time, Ethan closed his exam booklet and exhaled slowly. Around him, students groaned or smiled or looked shell-shocked. He simply sat still, letting the accomplishment wash over him. He'd done it without his father's money, without his family name, without anything except the tools Maya had given him and his own determination to use them. At the Brooks' small apartment across town, Maya paced the worn carpet of their living room, unable to concentrate on anything. She tried reading, tried homework, tried helping her mother with chores, but her mind kept drifting back to Ethan sitting in that exam hall. "Baby, you're going to wear a hole in that floor," Anita said from the kitchen doorway. "What if he panics? What if he freezes? What if? What if he does exactly what you taught him and succeeds?" Anita moved to her daughter and placed gentle hands on her shoulders. "You gave him everything he needed. The rest is up to him. But we didn't have enough time. We needed at least another week, too." "Maya," Anita's voice was firm but loving. "You can't control this. You can't take the test for him. At some point, you have to trust that what you built together is strong enough to stand on its own." Maya sank onto their second-hand couch, pulling her knees to her chest. "I just really want him to succeed, Mom. He deserves to succeed. I know he does." Anita sat beside her daughter. "And I think you care about him more than you're admitting." Maya's cheeks flushed. "He's my friend. He's more than that. And you know it. That's what scares me." Anita's expression grew serious. "That boy lives in a different world, Maya. Even if his heart is good, even if he cares about you too, his father will never allow it. Men like Charles Calder don't let their children marry down. Who said anything about marriage? We're just friends who look at each other like the sun rises and sets in each other's eyes." Anita smiled sadly. "I've been watching, baby. I know what I see." Maya couldn't argue because her mother was right. Somewhere between teaching visual anchors and late-night study sessions, something had shifted. Ethan had become more than a project, more than someone she was helping. He'd become someone whose happiness mattered to her own. Her phone buzzed with a text. Maya lunged for it, heart racing. It was from Ethan. "I didn't just remember. I understood. Thank you." Maya read the message 3 times, trying not to cry from relief and pride, and something deeper she wasn't ready to name. She typed back, "I knew you could do it," but she wanted to say so much more. That same afternoon, Dean Morrison's office received a call from Mr. Harrison. "I need to flag something about the midterm exam." "What's the issue?" Morrison asked, already dreading another cheating scandal. "Ethan Calder finished early and appears to have done exceptionally well, given his academic history. I'm concerned we should verify the integrity of his test." Morrison leaned back in his chair, conflicted. On one hand, students did sometimes show dramatic improvement. On the other hand, the Calder name came with complications. If Ethan had somehow cheated and they didn't catch it, the school's reputation would suffer. But if they accused him falsely, Charles Calder would make their lives miserable. "What do you suggest?" "A second exam, unannounced, covering the same material but different questions. If his improvement is legitimate, he should be able to replicate the performance." Morrison hesitated, then nodded. "Contact Charles Calder. Tell him we want to verify his son's growth by administering a follow-up assessment. Frame it as an opportunity for Ethan to prove his progress." Charles received the call at his office downtown. He listened to Dean Morrison's carefully worded explanation, heard the suspicion underneath the polite language, and felt a surge of dark satisfaction. Perfect. This would expose whatever fraud his son had been attempting. "Test him as hard as you want," Charles said coldly. "If my son has actually learned something, he should be able to demonstrate it consistently. And if he's been cheating," he left the threat unspoken. That evening, Ethan returned home exhausted but hopeful. He found his father waiting in the foyer, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "How did it go?" Charles asked. "Good. Really good, actually. The school called. They want to test you again. Harder. Next week." Ethan's stomach dropped. "What? What?" "Because your sudden improvement looks suspicious. Because people assume you cheated." Charles studied his son's reaction carefully. "They're giving you a chance to prove your performance was legitimate. You should be grateful." "I didn't cheat, Dad. I studied. I actually learned the material." "Then you have nothing to worry about." Charles turned toward his office, then paused. "But Ethan, if I find out you've been dishonest, if I discover you've embarrassed this family with some scheme, the consequences will be severe. Do you understand?" I understand that you still don't believe in me. Ethan's voice was steady despite the anger burning in his chest. Even when I do well, you assume the worst. Charles didn't respond, simply walked away, leaving Ethan standing alone in the cavernous foyer. That night, Helen found Ethan in the library, staring at his textbooks with a mixture of determination and despair. Your father told me about the second exam. Of course he did. Ethan didn't look up. Helen sat beside him, her presence a rare comfort. Can I tell you something about your father? Something I've never told you before. Does it explain why he's such a nightmare? Maybe. Helen took a breath. Charles failed out of 2 schools before he got his degree. His own father humiliated him publicly, called him stupid and worthless in front of their entire family. Charles spent years proving everyone wrong, building his empire specifically to show he was more than those failures. Ethan finally looked at his mother. So he became successful. Why does that make him treat me like garbage? Because seeing you struggle reminds him of his own pain. Every failing grade of yours is a mirror showing him the boy he used to be, the one he spent decades trying to forget. Helen's eyes glistened with tears. He pushes you so hard because he's terrified you'll experience the same humiliation he did. But in trying to save you from that pain, he's inflicting a different kind. That doesn't make it okay. No, it doesn't. But explains it. Helen took her son's hand. The fear that made him cruel is the same fear that lives in you. The fear of not being enough. But you're breaking that cycle, Ethan. You're learning that failure isn't fatal and asking for help isn't weakness. That makes you stronger than your father ever was. Ethan felt tears sting his eyes. I just want him to be proud of me. Just once. I know, sweetheart. And maybe someday he will be. But until then, you need to be proud of yourself. Because I already am. They sat together in the quiet library, mother and son, both prisoners of Charles Calder's empire in different ways, both searching for freedom they weren't sure how to claim. The second exam was scheduled for Friday morning, giving Ethan 5 days to prepare. He threw himself into review with desperate intensity, recreating every visual anchor, practicing every compression technique Maya had taught him. But this time, he had to do it completely alone. Maya couldn't risk another secret meeting, and Ethan knew better than to push it. So he studied in isolation, trusting that the foundation they'd built together was solid enough to hold. On Wednesday evening, Charles summoned Ethan to his office. The room felt oppressive, dark wood paneling, expensive artwork that projected power rather than beauty, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city Charles had conquered. Sit, Charles commanded, gesturing to the chair across from his massive desk. Ethan sat, keeping his spine straight, refusing to show fear. Charles threw a folder onto the desk between them. Ethan's midterm exam, already graded. The score at the top, 87%. Explain this sudden miracle, Charles said, his voice dangerously quiet. In detail. I studied, really studied, used new techniques that actually work for me. What techniques? Visual learning, pattern recognition, compression anchors. Ethan met his father's gaze steadily. Methods that match how my brain actually processes information instead of forcing me to memorize like everyone else. And who taught you these methods? The question hung in the air like a blade. Ethan knew exactly where this was going. Does it matter? I learned them. I used them. I succeeded. Charles leaned forward, eyes hard. The maid's daughter brainwashed you, didn't she? Filled your head with tricks and shortcuts while attaching herself to you like a parasite. Maya helped me learn how to learn. That's not brainwashing, that's teaching. Ethan's voice rose despite his attempts to stay calm. Something none of your expensive tutors could do, because they didn't actually care whether I understood. They just wanted their paychecks. That girl saw an opportunity and exploited your weakness. She manipulated you into thinking you needed her. She believed in me when you didn't. Ethan stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You fired her for helping me succeed because you can't stand the idea that someone you consider beneath us is better than you. It's something that matters. Charles's expression turned to ice. Watch your tone. No, I'm done watching my tone, watching my words, watching myself fail just to avoid disappointing you. Ethan's hand shook, but his voice stayed strong. Maya gave me something you never could. Hope. And you destroyed that because of your ego and your fear. Your little friend and her mother are gone. I made sure of it. The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. What did you do? I terminated Anita Brooks's employment. As of this morning, neither she nor her daughter are permitted on Calder property. They've been compensated generously, of course. I'm not a monster. Yes, you are. Ethan's voice dropped to a whisper. You absolutely are. He turned and walked out of the office, ignoring his father's command to return. His mind reeled with the revelation. Maya and Anita were fired. Because of him. Because he'd been too weak to protect them from his father's cruelty. He pulled out his phone and called Maya. It went straight to voicemail. He tried 3 more times with the same result. Finally, he sent a text. I'm so sorry. I'll fix this. I promise. Across town, Maya sat on her bed, phone clutched in her hand, tears streaming down her face. Her mother had just told her they'd been fired, that Charles Calder had given them 2 weeks to vacate their apartment because it was owned by his corporation and reserved for current staff only. It's not your fault, Anita said, sitting beside her daughter. I knew this would happen. Men like Charles Calder always destroy what threatens them. But we didn't threaten anything. I just helped Ethan study. You threatened his control. You showed his son that he could succeed without Charles's methods, without Charles's approval. That's unforgivable to someone like him. Anita's voice hardened in a way Maya had never heard before. And I think it's time you knew the whole truth. She retrieved the metal box from its hiding place and opened it on the bed between them. Letters, documents, drafts covered in red corrections, and notes. 17 years ago, I was top of my class at university. Brilliant grades, scholarship student, on track to graduate with highest honors. Anita pulled out a particular document, a thesis proposal covered in her handwriting. Charles Calder was in several of my classes. Rich, entitled, and failing miserably. Maya listened, hardly breathing. He hired me to tutor him. I was desperate for money, so I agreed. Then he asked me to help him with his senior thesis. Help turned into collaboration. Collaboration turned into me writing the entire paper while he took credit. Anita's hands trembled. When I confronted him, threatened to tell the university, he had his father's lawyers draw up a non-disclosure agreement. Sign it and receive payment, or refuse and face legal action I couldn't afford to fight. Mom, Maya's voice broke. I signed, took the money, watched him submit my work as his own. That thesis earned him his degree, opened doors to his first investments, became the foundation of everything he built. Anita looked at her daughter with eyes full of old pain. Charles Calder stole my future, and now history is repeating itself with you and his son. Maya stared at the documents, understanding flooding through her like ice water. That's why you warned me. Why you wanted me to stay away. Because these people destroy what they touch. They take what they want and leave nothing but wreckage behind. Anita wiped her eyes. But you're stronger than I was. You kept evidence, kept dates, kept proof. And now we have a choice. What choice? We can walk away, take whatever settlement Charles offers, and disappear from their lives. Or, Anita held up the original thesis drafts. We can show the world what he really is. Maya's phone buzzed with another message from Ethan. She looked at it, then at her mother, then at the documents spread across the bed. What do you want to do, Mom? Anita was quiet for a long moment. I want you to decide. This is your future now, not just mine. Whatever you choose, I'll support you. Maya thought about Ethan, his desperation, his determination, his fundamental decency, trapped inside a family that was slowly killing his spirit. She thought about how he defended her to his father, how he'd risked everything to learn from her. And she thought about justice, not revenge, but the simple truth finally being spoken. We expose him, Maya said quietly, not to hurt Ethan, but to free him. He deserves to know what kind of man he's trying so hard to please. Anita nodded slowly, something like pride shining through her fear. Then we'll need help. Someone with reach, with credibility, who can't be silenced by money. I might know someone, Maya said, already reaching for her phone. Meanwhile, Ethan had made his own decision. He couldn't let Maya and her mother lose everything because of him. If his father wanted to play power games, Ethan would learn to play them too. He went to the one person who might actually help, his mother. He found Helen in her sitting room, working on correspondence for a charity foundation. She looked up as he entered, immediately seeing the determination on his face. Mom, I need your help. What kind of help? The kind that goes against Dad. Ethan sat across from her. He fired Anita and Maya, kicked them out of their home, all because Maya helped me learn. I need you to help me make this right. Helen set down her pen carefully. Ethan, your father's decisions regarding staff are his to make. I can't or won't. Ethan's voice was sharp. You told me you were proud of the person I'm becoming. Well, the person I'm becoming doesn't stand by while innocent people get destroyed for doing the right thing. Helen stared at her son, seeing something new in him, a spine, a moral center that refused to bend despite the pressure. She thought about her own compromises, the years she'd spent being quiet and compliant, and felt ashamed. What do you need from me? Evidence. Access. Whatever you can give me about Dad's business dealings, his past, anything that might level the playing field. Ethan leaned forward. He has power, but power built on lies can be shattered by truth. You're asking me to betray my husband. I'm asking you to choose between protecting a cruel man or helping innocent people, between comfort and conscience. Ethan's eyes held hers. You were a lawyer once, Mom. You believed in justice. What happened to that woman? Helen felt tears burn behind her eyes. She'd asked herself that same question 1,000 times over the years, watching herself disappear into the role of Charles Calder's decorative wife. She's still here, Helen whispered, just buried very deep. She stood and moved to her private desk, unlocking a drawer with a key she wore on a chain around her neck. Inside were documents she'd quietly collected over the years, copies of contracts, suspicious transactions, things that had troubled her, but she'd been too afraid to question. I don't know what's useful here, Helen said, handing the folder to her son. But if there's something that can help Maya and her mother, you have my permission to use it. Ethan took the folder, feeling the weight of it. Not just paper, but responsibility, consequence, the point of no return. Dad will never forgive you for this. Perhaps it's time I stop needing his forgiveness. Helen touched her son's cheek gently. You've been braver than I've ever been. Maybe it's time I learned from you. That night, 3 separate plans began forming in 3 separate locations. At the Brooks apartment, Maya and Anita compiled their evidence. Original thesis drafts, timestamps, emails from 17 years ago that Anita had kept hidden, witness statements from old classmates who remembered the truth. In the Calder mansion, Ethan and Helen reviewed documents that showed the darker side of Charles's empire. Employees silenced with aggressive NDAs, competitors destroyed through questionable means, a pattern of taking credit for others' work that went back decades. And in his office, Charles Calder sat in the dark, convinced he'd won, convinced he'd protected his family from contamination, never suspecting that his own past was about to rise up and devour him. The second exam was in 2 days. But now it was about so much more than Ethan's grades. It was about truth, justice, and whether the powerful could finally be held accountable for the people they destroyed. The breaking point was coming, and when it arrived, nothing in the Calder household would ever be the same. Thursday night, the night before Ethan's second exam, he received a text from an unknown number. Meet me at the park on Willow Street. 9 p.m. Come alone. Maya. Ethan didn't hesitate. He slipped out through the service entrance, the same route he'd used weeks ago, and took the bus across town. The park was nearly empty, just a few late-night joggers and dog walkers. Maya sat on a bench under a streetlight, her mother beside her. When Ethan approached, Maya stood. Her eyes were red from crying, but her expression was determined. I'm so sorry, Ethan said immediately. Well, my father did. Isn't your fault. Maya's voice was firm. You're not him, Ethan. You need to understand that. What your father did to us, what he's done to others, that's his choice, his character, not yours. But if I hadn't asked for your help, then you'd still be failing and hating yourself. Anita spoke up, her voice gentle but strong. Maya made a choice to help you. We both knew the risks. What Charles did was his decision, not a consequence of your actions. Ethan looked between them, seeing strength where he'd expected anger. I found documents. My mom helped me. Things about my father's business dealings, people he's silenced, patterns of behavior. I think we can. We know, Maya interrupted. We have our own evidence. From 17 years ago, Anita pulled out copies of the documents from her metal box and handed them to Ethan. He read by the streetlight, his face growing paler with each page. His father's name on work that wasn't his. Anita's original drafts. The threatening letter. The NDA. He stole your thesis, Ethan whispered. Everything he built started with stealing your work. Yes, Anita said quietly. And I've stayed silent for 17 years because I was afraid. Afraid of his power, his lawyers, his ability to destroy what little I had left. She looked at her daughter with pride. But Maya reminded me that silence protects the guilty, not the innocent. We're going to expose him, Maya said. Not to hurt you, but because the truth matters. Because people deserve to know what kind of man he really is. Ethan stood there, the documents in his hands, facing a choice that would define the rest of his life. He could defend his father, protect the family name, preserve his inheritance and privilege. Or he could choose truth over comfort, justice over loyalty. Tell me what you need from me, Ethan said finally. I'll testify. I'll provide documents. Whatever it takes. Maya's eyes widened. Ethan, you understand what this means? Your father will. Disown me. Disinherit me. Destroy me if he can. Ethan's voice was steady. I know, but I'd rather be poor and honest than rich and complicit. You taught me more than study techniques, Maya. You taught me what integrity looks like. Anita stepped forward and placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. You're a good kid. Your father doesn't deserve you. Maybe not, but I'm done trying to earn his approval. Ethan looked at Maya. I have my exam tomorrow morning. After that, we go public with everything. Together. Together, Maya agreed. They stood in the quiet park, three people bound by shared trauma and shared determination, preparing to take on one of the most powerful men in the city. When Ethan returned home that night, he found Charles waiting in the foyer, arms crossed, face cold with fury. Where were you? Out, Ethan replied, meeting his father's gaze without flinching. You met with that girl again, after I explicitly forbade it. You don't control who I see or who I trust. Ethan moved toward the staircase. Not anymore. Charles grabbed his arm, stopping him. You have your exam tomorrow. This defiance, this rebellion, it stops now. You will take that test, you will pass it on your own merit, and you will prove that your success has nothing to do with that family. Ethan pulled his arm free. What if I don't want to prove anything to you? What if your opinion stopped mattering to me the moment I realized what kind of man you really are? What are you talking about? I know what you did, Dad. To Anita Brooks. 17 years ago. Ethan watched his father's face carefully. I know about the thesis you stole, the career you destroyed, the life you built on someone else's work. Charles's expression transformed from anger to something more dangerous. Cold calculation. You know nothing. A disgruntled ex-employee making accusations is meaningless. I have lawyers who... She has proof. Original drafts, timestamps, witness statements. And I have documents from Mom showing this isn't an isolated incident. It's a pattern. Ethan's voice stayed level. Your empire is built on theft and intimidation. And everyone's about to find out. For the first time in Ethan's life, he saw genuine fear flash across his father's face. Charles's mask cracked, revealing the desperate, insecure man underneath all that power and control. If you do this, you destroy everything, Charles said, his voice barely above a whisper. The company, our reputation, our family name, maybe some things deserve to be destroyed. Ethan turned and walked up the stairs, leaving his father standing alone in the foyer, finally understanding that he'd lost more than his son's respect. He'd lost his son entirely. In her room, Helen heard the entire exchange through the walls. She sat at her vanity, hands trembling, knowing that tomorrow would change everything. She thought about the woman she'd been before marrying Charles. Passionate, principled, unafraid to fight for what was right. That woman was waking up after years of sleep, and she was ready for war. Friday morning arrived with clear skies and sharp autumn air. Ethan woke feeling strangely calm. He dressed carefully, ate breakfast alone in the kitchen while staff bustled around him, and gathered his materials for the exam with steady hands. Charles didn't come to see him off. Helen did, kissing his forehead and whispering, "Whatever happens today, I'm proud of you." The second exam was administered in a private room with only Dean Morrison and Mr. Harrison present. The questions were harder, more complex, designed to expose any fraud or memorization without understanding. Ethan sat down, took a deep breath, and opened the test booklet. The first question appeared about the French Revolution. asking him to analyze the economic factors that led to social upheaval and draw parallels to modern wealth inequality. A question designed to require critical thinking, synthesis, genuine comprehension. He closed his eyes and saw Maya's tree, roots, trunk, branches. But this time, he didn't just recall facts. He understood them. The compression techniques she'd taught him had done more than help him memorize. They'd taught him to think in connections, to see patterns, to analyze rather than just regurgitate. His hand moved across the paper, confident and clear. Mathematics problems came next, complex equations that required multiple steps. He saw Maya's building in his mind, but now he was navigating its rooms with familiarity, understanding how each floor connected to the others. Halfway through, something Maya had said during one of their sessions echoed in his mind. Don't fight the fear. Redirect it. The anxiety that usually paralyzed him transformed into focused energy. His panic attack tried to surface, vision narrowing, breath shortening. But Ethan recognized the pattern and used Maya's techniques to center himself. Breathe. Visualize. Trust the work you've done. The panic receded. Clarity returned. 2 hours later, he set down his pen on the final page. Mr. Harrison collected the exam with a neutral expression, but Dean Morrison's eyebrows were raised. We'll have results within the hour, Morrison said. Please wait in the hallway. Ethan sat on a bench outside the office, exhausted but certain. He'd done everything he could. The rest was beyond his control. His phone buzzed. Maya, how did it go? I think I crushed it, he typed back. Meet you at the courthouse at noon? We'll be there, she confirmed. The plan was in motion. Maya and Anita had contacted a journalist known for exposing corporate corruption, providing copies of all their evidence. The story would break this afternoon. By evening, Charles Calder's empire would be under investigation, his reputation shattered, his crimes finally exposed. 45 minutes later, Dean Morrison emerged from his office, holding the graded exam. His expression was complicated, surprised, impressed, and slightly apologetic. Mr. Calder, I owe you an apology. Your score on this exam is 92%, higher than your first attempt. The improvement is legitimate, remarkable even. He handed Ethan the test. You've not only passed, but excelled. Whatever changes you've made in your approach to learning, they're clearly effective. Ethan looked at the grade, feeling a surge of pride that had nothing to do with his father's approval. Thank you, sir. There's more. Based on your performance and dramatic improvement, the faculty wants to recognize your achievement at our academic assembly next week. We'd like you to speak about your transformation, perhaps inspire other struggling students. I'd be honored, Ethan said, but I'll need to give credit where it's due, to the person who actually taught me how to learn. Morrison nodded slowly. Of course, that would be appropriate. Ethan left school and headed directly downtown. The courthouse steps were crowded with people. Journalists, camera crews, curious onlookers. Maya and Anita stood near the entrance with their lawyer, surrounded by reporters asking questions. When Maya saw Ethan approaching, she broke away from the crowd and ran to him. They collided in a hug that felt like coming home. You came, she said, voice muffled against his shoulder. Did you really think I wouldn't? He pulled back to look at her. We're in this together, remember? The press conference began. Anita stood at a podium, her voice initially shaking but growing stronger as she told her story. The thesis Charles had stolen. The NDA he'd forced her to sign. The 17 years of silence while he built an empire on her work. Maya provided documentation, original drafts, timestamps, correspondence. The lawyer explained the legal implications, the investigation they were demanding, the pattern of behavior they'd uncovered. Then Ethan stepped forward. The cameras swiveled toward him, recognizing the Calder heir. My name is Ethan Calder, and I'm here to support these women in their pursuit of justice. My father, Charles Calder, built his success through theft and intimidation. I have documents provided by my mother, Helen Calder, showing this behavior extends far beyond this single incident. It's time the truth was told, regardless of the consequences to my family's reputation. The crowd erupted with questions. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted his name. But Ethan stood steady, Maya beside him, Anita on his other side, 3 people united against a man who thought power made him untouchable. That evening, The story broke on every major news outlet. Billionaire's empire built on stolen work, read the headlines. Charles Calder's face appeared on screens across the city, his carefully constructed image crumbling in real time. At the mansion, Charles sat in his office, watching his world implode. His phone rang constantly, board members, lawyers, business partners all demanding answers. He ignored them all, staring at the television where his son stood beside the woman he'd tried to erase, telling truths Charles had paid millions to bury. Helen appeared in the doorway, dressed for travel, suitcases behind her. "I'm leaving," she said simply. "Taking Ivy with me. She doesn't need to see what happens next." "Helen, we can fix this. My lawyers will. Your lawyers can't fix the fact that you're a fraud, that our entire life was built on lies." She looked at him with something close to pity. "I wasted years enabling you, being complicit through my silence. But Ethan showed me it's never too late to choose differently. Where will you go? Away from you. That's all that matters." She turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I did love you once. But the man I loved never actually existed. He was just another one of your thefts." She left, taking their daughter, leaving Charles alone in his mansion of 40 rooms, surrounded by everything he'd stolen and nothing he'd earned. 2 weeks later, Ashford Preparatory held its academic assembly. Ethan stood at the podium, looking out at hundreds of students, teachers, and parents. His father wasn't there. Charles was meeting with federal investigators, his company under audit, his reputation destroyed. But Maya was there, sitting in the front row with Anita beside her. Helen and Ivy sat nearby, building new lives separate from Charles's shadow. "My name is Ethan Calder," he began, "and until a few months ago, I was failing. Every test, every exam, every attempt to learn felt impossible. I thought I was broken, stupid, destined to disappoint everyone, including myself." He paused, looking directly at Maya. "Then someone taught me that there's no wrong way to learn, just different ways. Someone showed me that asking for help isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Someone believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." He smiled. That person was Maya Brooks, daughter of Anita Brooks, one of the most brilliant teachers I've ever known. And I'm only standing here today because she had the courage to see past our differences and the patience to help me discover my own potential. The auditorium erupted in applause. The school board, moved by the story and seeking positive publicity after the Calder scandal, announced a full scholarship for Maya, 4 years, all expenses paid, at any university she chose. Maya stood, tears streaming down her face, as the assembly gave her a standing ovation. Anita wrapped her in a hug, both of them crying and laughing simultaneously. After the ceremony, Ethan and Maya stood outside on the school's front steps, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. "So what happens now?" Maya asked. "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "My trust fund is frozen pending the investigation. The mansion will probably be seized. I might actually have to get a regular job." He laughed. "Turns out being broke and honest feels better than being rich and miserable." "You're not alone, you know," Maya said softly. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." "Together," Ethan agreed. They walked down the steps side by side, two teenagers who'd started from completely different worlds and found common ground in truth, courage, and the simple act of helping each other become better versions of themselves. Behind them, the school stood proud and prestigious. Ahead of them, the future stretched uncertain but full of possibility. Ethan had lost his father's empire but gained something infinitely more valuable. His own identity, built not on theft or lies, but on genuine achievement and authentic connection. Maya had exposed the truth and found justice, not just for her mother, but for everyone Charles Calder had destroyed over the years. And both of them had learned that real success isn't measured in grades or money or power. It's measured in the courage to stand for what's right, even when it costs everything. As the sun set on this chapter of their lives, another was just beginning. One where Ethan Calder wasn't defined by his father's crimes, and Maya Brooks wasn't limited by the world's low expectations. They were free, and freedom, they discovered, was worth more than any inheritance could ever provide. Here's a question worth considering. If the foundation of everything you believe in crumbled tomorrow, would you have the courage to rebuild yourself from nothing, or would you cling to comfortable lies? If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about courage, redemption, and the price of truth.